Welcome to the Startup Leaders Show, where we learn lessons from startup founders and executives. I am your host, Lisa Dreher, and I am really excited to introduce our guests for today, Dr. Alex Carrella. He is the CEO and VP of Strategy and Growth at MSI DFAT, and Bradley Hope, who is the U.S. Business Development Manager for MSI DFAT. Welcome to the show, Bradley and Alex.
Great to meet you, Lisa. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Good morning.
It's so good to have you here. Maybe we can start by having each of you give a little bit of background on yourselves and then MSI DFAT.
I'll let Alex go first.
Sure. I'm an aerospace engineer turned business manager and company manager, and I have been working in this industry for 15 years now. I was a young kid when I started. A lot of things done. We have developed technologies and teams, and we have expanded the use of this technology over the past 20 years, and we're still going at it. So there's still a lot to do, and we are now creating more and more company and industry awareness. And with the team that we have, Brad and the rest of the team, we're excited to look forward, because there's a lot more things coming. So that's about me. I will tell you about the company in a bit, and then we can go through the company.
Bradley Hope with MSI DFAT, and I've been in the sales, marketing, business development space ever since I was in college. And then graduating, went on to get my master's in business. And then I fell into the test engineering niche or test engineering industry, and I've stuck with it and sort of whittled down through aerospace and defense into the space industry. And I had an amazing opportunity given to me through prior relationships. Alex called me one day with the opportunity to work for MSI DFAT and really help with the commercialization side. So one book that I really like to read maybe once a year is 24 Steps to Disciplined Entrepreneurship by Bob Allett out of MIT. And his formula is innovation equals the product of invention times commercialization. So it's not enough to invent something. Once you have something cool or cool technology, it could just sit on the shelf and die. And that's why you need me to help commercialize that.
Excellent. So, Alex, maybe you can give us background on MSI DFAT.
MSI DFAT was as a legal entity, as a company, was born in 2016, spinning off out of MSI. MSI Maryland Sound International is a major production company that was started, that is origin back in the 70s, 60s, and he produced some of the biggest names in music, and Pink Floyd, Carlissimo. So it's been a history of decades of producing the best artists until in '98, someone in NASA thought that to do some of the standard acoustic tests that they do in the space industry, instead of using dedicated facility, they would use loudspeakers. I mean, it's noise, they thought, and why don't we use loudspeakers? And so they called up the biggest name in the game at the time. There was MSI, and the owner is Bob Goldstein. Of course, said, "Why not? Let's try. We have the speakers. We come down and we make noise. You tell us what to do?" And that was the start in 1998. Now, this is a technology. These things that they started at the time, it was driven by business, as Brad was saying, commercializing something. So the whole point of this technology was to bring a lot of savings to this space company. They had to do these tests. So these tests, something they had to do anyway. But instead of doing it in this specific facility and this dedicated facility around the country, they would go with trucks of speakers to the place where the satellite was and would test on site. So the amount of money saved is absolutely enormous. So that's what we've been doing since 1998. In 2016, we spun off. Instead of using loudspeakers from concert, we started to make our own loudspeakers. So these are specifically made loudspeakers, louder, more portable. We can stack them up. We can go all the way to to 40 feet and counting. We have project to go even higher than that. So we can make it as portable and loud as necessary. But for that reason, we had to step away from commercial loudspeakers and make our own design in terms of power, in terms of acoustic power, and rigging and mounting. So that's MSI that started its business.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, so sorry, Bradley, were you going to say something?
Just to point out one small detail. Again, the commercial off-the-shelf speakers are great, and we started as a concert company. And when the aerospace engineers approached MSI, and we started MSI DFAT with a direct field acoustic testing, we blew up millions of dollars of speakers. So it's not an easy thing to do by any means.
Got it. And so, just to kind of point out the obvious thing here, clearly MSI DFAT is not a startup, but you are working with a lot of companies that might be bringing new space technologies to market. And so that's really why we wanted to have you here today. Maybe you can talk a little bit about, I guess, entrepreneurship within MSI DFAT.
Yeah, I can take a first swing at that. When I think of entrepreneurship, I think of two avenues. You can go out on your own and do your own thing, or you can do it within a company. Doing it out on your own is something that's very risky and certainly takes a great deal of effort. Bob Goldstein, I think, is an incredible entrepreneur, somebody that Alex and I both learned from. Unfortunately, I don't have that level of risk tolerance, so I'm more of an entrepreneur. When I get hired into an organization, I try to find ways to create and deliver value, both for the organization itself as well as for the customers. And then within the space industry, we're really solving a valuable business problem. So if you look at the industry historically, there were some incumbents with strong competitive advantages. NASA historically operated with a lot of funding and nearly as a monopoly within the States. And then you have these big primes, and the primes face barely any competition. And they still, to some extent, rely on a lot of their historical competitive advantages and large barriers to entry to accessing space. But then Elon Musk came around and started SpaceX. And ever since then, the new space economy has surged, and there's more and more companies popping up left and right, trying to reach outer space through more economical methods or solving other types of problems. So the reason that we exist, as Alex pointed out earlier, is that we solve a real business issue for our customers, whether they're existing large enterprises or new startups looking to scale up their operations. We can lower the barrier to entry for them to access space by reducing the time and costs it takes to achieve launch certification through acoustic qualification testing.
If I can add something about the entrepreneurship at MSI, is something that I've been very passionate and I have the full backup of the ownership, is that you need to have in a startup, we talk a lot of startups, and you need to have the right team. So you need to have the right competencies and skill set that bring. So there is something in business that is 1 + 1 = 3. And that's when you try to add, you create synergies, and you put around the table and in your company people that have complementary skill set, that then when they add up, they do more than the sum of the single element and the single people. And that's what we've been trying to put together, a team of people, the guys that go out, do testing, and they double down as researcher, and they create, come up with new ideas. The team that manages and the business and the sales, they act as a product manager. So you don't have a one of each, but you have the sum of an incredible team that make MSI way more than the sum of each element.
Excellent. That is fantastic and great input from both of you. Thank you. Maybe we can talk a little bit about maybe an actual example of a solution that you've tested recently and how that testing went, where it was performed, kind of just a little bit more background on an actual specific use case.
Alex,
have,
you want to talk about the ones in our background, maybe?
yeah, we have there is few, and many are again sensitive commercial or governmental sensitive programs, but maybe the one that is behind my back that everybody can recognize is the Orion crew module. So this is the mission that NASA has put together, the first main mission since Apollo, to go back to the moon and to put astronauts back to the moon. So that there are a number of them planned. Two of them flew. Artemis is called Artemis, or Artemis 1 and Artemis 2, and there are two elements of the spacecraft that gets launched and goes to the moon. There's a European service module that is made and run by the European Space Agency together with Airbus, and the crew module is made by Lockheed Martin. So Lockheed Martin is the prime contractor of the mission, and the test required a lot of meetings, a lot of preparation. There is very little room for improvisation. So the meetings, as we got closer to the test date, the meeting got more frequent. The information exchange got even more detailed, and eventually we ended up setting up, running the test flawlessly the first time. And the second time we had an interesting. So the interesting part was that the test site is also in the same building where astronaut quarters are. So there was a launch of a Dragon mission, and the astronauts were sleeping. And now, a week before the launch, there is a strict medical, physiological, and preparation and routine preparation to the launch, and they have to sleep at very specific hours. There's no room for, can you stay a half an hour? No, everything is very very well defined by all this team of scientists, and so we had to test in the same building, so we couldn't make noise. And it was interesting because somebody could have lasted for 3 days had to go on for 7 days. It was interesting. So we had to learn about astronaut schedule, and we learned how they sleep. But eventually we got it done, and of course, customers and everybody happy. But we learn new things. That's how it works. We go on site. We have a number of meetings with engineering teams. We prepare everything. We have our team that makes drawings, and everything is precise to the centimeter, or actually to the inch in the States. And everything is ready to roll out of our trucks, get stacked up together. And we switch on the amps, and we start making noise. And we have some dry run before actual satellite gets in, because it's a whole operation. And then we start making noise, and we have a liftoff. Now, the whole point of these tests is actually a structural. No, we do the acoustic part, but the actual test is a structural test. So there's a lot of engineers and looking at hundreds of sensors, and to make sure that all the vibration levels are nominal. And that's what we do. That's what we're there for, to excite the structures as if it was on the launch pad. But what is important is the actual structural response, and that's what they look at.
Wow, amazing, amazing. What an exciting project to work on. And that is a perfect example of the work that you do. So when you're looking at a potential project, are you looking at like always very large projects or sometimes smaller projects? What is kind of the range of projects that you can support for this kind of, I guess, space qualification or certification?
Yeah, I can take a first stab at that. We test anything from components and subcomponents up to full-scale assembled structures. And we can test anything the size of a microwave to the size of a school bus or even larger. So one of the value propositions that we have at MSI DFAT is the ability to tailor each test setup according to what a customer needs. So we could test anything from a small satellite up to the entire upper stage of a rocket or a space station, for example. And we offer a portable acoustic testing solution. So we're able to meet a customer at any location that they want us to show up. We set up these speaker walls that you see behind me within a few days. We do a quick practice run, and then typically we will wheel in a test article, close up the circle, and run the test, blasting noise at the spacecraft or satellite for just one day, and then tear everything down. So typically there's only 1 day of downtime on whatever it is that we're testing. So that's a huge time savings for our customer. We also do offer in-house testing on smaller components as well. So if there's things like panels, customers will tend to ship those to our lab out in Baltimore, and we can run a quick test for them and return it promptly. But there's no size restriction. Actually, that's part of why customers are appealed to using us. And if you look at the traditional method, the traditional way of doing acoustic testing, there's a huge restriction, which is the comparison of the size of the test article to the size of the room that you would need to test in, which was known as a reverb chamber. And these facilities, there's still a few of them around the US, but you need to really know the size and the capability of the reverb chamber, and is it an appropriate fit for your size of test article. And then you'd have to insure your test article and ship it to that chamber, which can be an incredible distance, and it can be gone for a long period of time. So if you think about, shipping something pretty tall, you might need to insure that for a lot of money, look at different modes of transportation, whether you send it over the road, over water, through the air. If you need the Air Force to carry it, or send it through flight, or take down telephone wires, all of this is very time consuming, expensive, and it's a huge headache. So if we can just come on site wherever the customer needs us, set everything up and run a test, it solves a huge headache for our customers.
Let me, just to add what Brad just said, we are working on a project, and we are being contracted because the article doesn't fit one of these large rooms. So that's how big we can go. So there's like a large room, and the article is bigger than doesn't fit in this room, and that's where
Wow.
they call us in. So that's how big we can go. We can go really big.
That's amazing. Okay, one of the things that I'm really fascinated about that Alex said earlier on in the call was just kind of talking about how MSI DFAT has really, I guess, redefined and somewhat disrupted this industry. What have been, I guess, the biggest lessons that you've learned along the way in disrupting something that has been done a certain way for so long, but then delivering this in a new, better, simpler, faster, more cost-effective way? How has that been, and what is the biggest lesson you've learned along the way on that?
I think Alex should answer this one, and it's kind of interesting, especially with his background from former companies researching direct field acoustic testing as a method.
Yeah, I think the biggest, we learn a lot about the need for the space industry to have proof of concept and demonstration before actually adopting a technology. We've been working on this for a long time. The first test in the States were in early 2000, so late 98 was, and then NASA got involved, and they looked like, look, these data guys are not, something is not quite right. Why don't you make it better? And then the controller got better. In Europe, the same thing. We start doing some work. The company that hired us was great. Like, oh wow, this is great. We can do it a lot of tests. And then European Space Agency jumped in. It's like, oh, but you sure? Because the field and the acoustics and there's a difference. So we learned a lot about the acoustics of what we were trying to reproduce. And in doing that, we had to improve. And so it was an iterative process. And the industry and the community really came together. In 2018, I ran a session at a major conference where I had a special panel made of the most knowledgeable people on the planet. So it's like a niche. And so I had 6-7 of them, and I was chairing the discussion, and eventually we ended up with the decision of making a new handbook. So, there was a lot of industry input and a lot of agencies input. There was a lot of scientific knowledge, and then on the other hand, of course, we learned that there is a physics and limits of the system that we have. So there is a current going through wires that heat up and makes create thermal issues, and power management. We go out. I don't know. We mentioned that, but we go out with the generator to test. So the amount of power that we need, we can light up a little town with the amount of power that we need. We go with the generator to make sure that the power that we need is enough and is clean. So we learn a lot of management of requirement, of science, of physics and audio engineering. So the learning curve has been really steep, and we're still learning, we're still advancing. Again, we pioneered these 25 years ago. Don't believe that this is the last thing that you see. We have things in the background, working project that soon will be adopted in the field, and that's a cool stuff. That's really cool stuff. So we're learning a lot.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, well, I want to thank you both so much for being here today. This has been an incredibly fascinating conversation, and I so want to continue it. So perhaps we can schedule another call and dig even deeper into this topic. But in the meantime, if somebody wanted to learn more about MSI DFAT, what should they do?
Yeah, absolutely. We have our socials. We have a link tree that's linktr.ee/MSI DFAT. We're widely available on LinkedIn at MSI DFAT Services LLC, where you can follow our newsletter. We try to get that out once a month with the latest and greatest updates. And we're also on Instagram. Our handle is at MSI DFAT.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you both so much for making time to be here today and share your story. It's really exciting work that
Thank you for having us, Lisa.
Is doing.
It's been a
Yes,
pleasure talking to you.
absolutely my pleasure. And I do want to take a moment to thank GuideForce for hosting these sessions. To learn more about GuideForce, you can visit guideforce.com. And we'll see you next time on the Startup Leader Show.